Hi, and welcome to this video. In this one, we're going to talk about useReducer hook of React. So I was thinking of creating a video on useReducer and explaining it and what the difference is between this hook and useState and what even is this useReducer. And I wanted to go with like a couple of examples outlining the difference between useReducer and useState. But then I thought, okay, I could, instead of that, I could create a simple, very simple project that is going to showcase the power of useReducer and why we prefer it in more complex situations over the useState. And here is our application that we're going to build in this video. This is a simple multi-step form. The first step is personal information. Then we have the address, the preferences. The cool thing with this is about this app is once we fill out all these three steps, we're going to show a summary of everything that the user has done and selected in the summary page. So let's go ahead and let's write a first name. That's going to be John. The last name is going to be Doe. You need to fill out all the inputs before you can go to the next page. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to write a simple Gmail here. And now the first step has been completed. That's why this progress indicator is going to show this tick mark personal OK. And then we have the address details. We could go with this address. I'm just writing something so we can see how this app works. Let's go to next. And anytime you want to go to a previous step, you can do that as well. So if you go to previous step, the good thing is that all of the info will be there. So when we're moving from one route or one step to another, the info is going to still be there. And there we go. We got the first step, the second one, the third one. So in the third step, we have preferences, and by default, I have tick mark notifications as well as the theme preference for dark. But if you want, you can change this as well. Let's say you want to go with light and you don't want to receive any notifications, but you want to, for example, subscribe to a newsletter. So these are actually checkboxes, but these two for theme preference, they're radio buttons. All of them are styled in the same one. I'm going to show you how you can custom style checkboxes and radio buttons using Tailwind as well. And now once you hit next, that is it. You have all of the information. So you have a section for personal info. You have another section for the address. You have a section for preferences as well as preferences and theme preferences. And in here, if I just go to inspect, go to the console. Now, once you hit submit, you're going to see all of the information is going to be submitted so you can use it in your backend. Let's hit enter or just hit OK. And if I take a look at that here, we have all of the information right here. So we have the personal info, the address info, personal, and preferences. So this is the app that we're going to build in this video, and let's get started. Now, the way that I'm going to go about this app is I'm not going to just jump into details and theory of what is the difference between useReducer and useState and which one should you use where. We're going to basically tackle this app as a normal React front-end app. And whenever we want to do something with the UI, we want to change the UI, update the UI, or our user interface or the website, then we're going to talk about which hook we are going to use. So here I have an empty VS Code open. And we're going to get started with creating a simple Vite project. npm create Vite latest. And let's say Y. And then we want to create a React TypeScript project. I'm going to say npm I to install all of the packages, all of the dependencies. And this is going to take some time. So let me just pause the video here. So for our project, we have installed so far React and TypeScript. But then if I come to the completed project, if I say John Doe and this email, if I click on this next, take a look at this address bar. We have our local host, but then there is /address. So it means we're doing some kind of routing. And the routing that I'm going to use for this project is going to be React Router DOM. And to be able to install that, we're going to say npm install React Router DOM latest version. And it is done. After that, we are going to use some sort of icons, and the icon library is going to be Lucid React. And the final thing that we need to set up is Tailwind CSS for our styles. So to be able to install Tailwind CSS, I'm going to say npm install -d, because we want Tailwind CSS to be a development dependency. So we use it during the development stage, but if we want to push this app for production, there is no Tailwind CSS in production. There is pure CSS. So the compiler is just going to compile all Tailwind utility classes to their corresponding CSS properties. So let's hit enter in here. And there we go. And there is a little bit of setup revolving around Tailwind CSS. So once you have installed Tailwind CSS, let's take a look at our not this file, package.json file. And in here, we should be able to see everything that we have installed. We have the icon library, we have the React and React DOM, we have React Router, and we have installed Tailwind CSS version 4 right here as well. So I'm going to go to our Vite, and in here, we need to import Tailwind CSS. So I'm going to say import Tailwind CSS from at Tailwind CSS -Vite. And then we need to put it inside here as well. So I'm going to say Tailwind CSS is going to be put as a plugin. So after this, I'm going to go to my source. I'm going to click on this assets, hold control, click on this app CSS, and I'm going to delete both of them. I don't need any of these. I'm going to open up index.css, which holds all the styles for our scaffolded app. I'm going to get rid of all of that, and instead of that, I'm going to say add import Tailwind CSS. And the last thing that we need to do is we need to go to our index.html and make sure that this points to this index that we have created in here. So in here on the top, I'm going to say link. Where is that? So where are we? We are within the main directory. We need to go to the source directory. So source, and from there we need to select the index.css. Now our completed app has multi-step form, but this app that we're working on, I'm going to change its name. I'm going to say multi-step form app. So there is a difference between both of them. And now let's go ahead and let's put this side by side with the browser. Let's zoom this out. And of course, this multi-step form is fully responsive. There we go. So here it is. And let's go ahead and let's get started with our development server. So in here, I'm going to say npm run dev, hit enter. This is going to give us 5174. And here is our application crashing in here. And the reason for this is because we didn't modify our app file. So I'm going to select that, get rid of everything. I'm going to say export default function app. And this should be capital. Let's zoom this in a little bit. And the only thing that I want to do here is I'm going to say home. Let's save that. And there we go. We got our home page. There are a few styles that I want to apply inside of our index.css, and the reason for that is because I want these styles to be applied in, it doesn't matter which page we are, which component we are, I want these styles to be applied. So I'm going to select the body, and on the body, I'm going to apply a background color, that background color that you see on our completed app. And the text is going to be white for all of them. Now, if you don't like this background color, feel free to change it. This is what I've selected, and it by no means is something that you should necessarily stick with. And then for buttons, I'm just going to say cursor -pointer. And there we go. Everything is set up here. Now let's close that. I'm going to close our index.html. Let's close this package.json, and we're going to get started with our app.tsx. Now, the first thing that I want to do when it comes to this application is I want to set up the routing. And then we are going to complete each page depending on which route we are. So if I were to just increase this a little bit, if I come right here, we have this address. Let's go back. We have this route, which is the main route, localhost 5173. This is the main. And as we're moving forward with the steps, the route is going to change. So take a look at that here. If I click on next, it's 5173-address. Let's provide the address. And if I click on next, it's going to be the same thing. The / instead of address, we're going to have preferences. And then let's click on next, and then we have the summary. So let's go back. The summary before this preferences, we have the address, and here is the main page. So all of these are actually child routes of a main route, which is 5173. And that's how we are going to implement the routing for this one. Now, the reason for this is because this is what React is good in doing. So React is very good with coming up with single page applications. And even though this is a very small app, this is actually an SPA. So you have several different sections, but if you're moving or navigating from one part of your app to the next part, from one page technically to the next page, you're not refreshing the page. If you refresh, you're going to lose this data. So you're not refreshing, but you're going to the other page. That's an SPA. So that's at the end of the day, that's something that we want to get in here. So I'm going to go above. When it comes to routing and setting up routers, we need to talk about two things that are very popular, two kind of routing in React. One is stand-stack router, and the other one is React Router DOM. I personally prefer React Router. I've worked with it for years, and that just comes naturally. I have worked with stand-stack a lot as well, but it's something that I constantly feel like whenever I work with it, I keep missing React Router for some reason. So in here, when it comes to React Router, the first thing that you need to have is a few routes, of course. Now, routes are going to have multiple properties. When something has several properties, we use objects. And when you want to put several objects next to one another, we're going to use an array. So let's create our routes array that is going to hold multiple objects. Now, the first object that this is going to hold is going to be the home route. And the home route is signified or denoted by a single /. And when the user goes to this route, what should the user see? The user is going to see a component that is going to return some JSX, which is HTML with JavaScript. So what JSX do we want to show here? We show it. What do we want to show? We show this something called layout. We're yet to create this. I'm going over this, but we are going to create it in just a couple of minutes. Now, if the user goes to some page that does not exist inside of our application, we need to tell the user that kindly this page doesn't exist, go to some page that does exist. And React Router actually handles that for us, but we should provide the user with a better user experience. And that is going to come from our not found page. We are yet to create this page as well. Now, whenever we select a path and we pass in a component, keep in mind that the component, what does the component do? The component does some kind of operation using the functions and the states and the hooks that we pass in. But at the end of the day, what does the component return? And why is it important to talk about what it returns? Because what the component returns is something that the user sees. So the user does not see what kind of hooks you have used inside of your app, or what kind of functions have you used, like a normal function declaration or an arrow function. The user doesn't care. The user just wants some kind of an app to interact with and to use it. So the thing that the user sees, our UI, the user interface, that comes from what that component returns. So whatever this layout returns or this not found page returns, That's what the user is going to see. Now, after this, as I said, we're going to have one main route, and that main route is going to be consisting of several children routes. We're going to use the children routes here. Let me type it correctly, children. And this is going to be, since we are going to have several children, we need to denote that inside of an array as well. Now, what is going to be the first child? The first child is going to be the / itself, because the way that I'm going to I'm setting up routing for my apps is I give this / to the layout. And once the layout doesn't show any kind of content, it just shows the layout of our application, where is which. So in all of these pages, there is one thing that is always shown. And what is that? It's this progress indicator. So that comes from the layout. But what is shown on every individual page, that comes from that specific component right here. So this is the specific component, but this is something that is shown on every page. So if I click on next, you can see we still have that progress indicator, but all of this information, it has changed. So we need to have some sort of a layout. And this is my preference. This is how I go about it. And I think this is one of the easier ways of going about this. Now, when I go to the path, I show the layout, but the layout is going to require some sort of content to be shown inside of the layout. And that's going to come from our personal info component that we are yet to create. We're going to create all of these components. Don't worry about it. For now, I just want to create the paths. So this is the first path. We need to separate them using commas. And I'm going to basically create the second path. We need to go ahead and change this. So the second path was the address one. So I'm going to say when the user goes to the address, what should the user see? The user should see something that is returned from our address component. The user is going to see that. Let's copy paste this below. After the address, what did we have? We had the preferences. So I'm going to say preferences. And once the user goes there, the user is going to see the content that is being returned by the preferences component. And after that, what do we have? We have the final one, which is summary. And we need to capitalize this S as well. Now that we have created all of these, we need to capture them and make sure that they surround our entire application. But before doing that, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and to create these components so you can see where they go. The way that I'm going to go about this is inside of the source, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say create folder. I'm going to pass in pages in here. So all of these, this layout, except for the layout, this not found, personal info, address, preferences, and summary, these are actually pages. So let's go ahead and let's create them. Well, I should technically provide them with the suffix of page, and that way it makes more sense that they're actually pages. I'm going to select first off, let's grab our not found page. And in here, I'm going to say new file, put that there, .tsx. Let's come right here. What is this going to do? This is going to basically export something for us, this not found page. And what is that? For now, what do we want to show inside of our website is we're just going to say 404, not found. And now, if I just remove the last character and add it again, hit enter, there we go. We have inserted that in there. And let's go ahead. Let's create the next one. A little bit of a tedious process, but very important for you if you just go ahead and type it out. And we have this component. What is this component going to show? Return personal. Let's save this, export. It seems I've mistyped this. And there we go. Now we should be able to import, we should be able to import this. There we go. Let's go with the next one. We have address page.tsx, export default function. This is the name of the function. Now, all components in React are technically JavaScript functions. So that's why you are going to see this function. And then the function returns something, which is that HTML that the user sees. And let's import that here. Only 2 remaining. Let's go ahead and let's create both of them. Preferences page, export default function preferences page, and this is going to return preferences. Let's save this. Let's import this as well. And what do we have? We have the summary page, the last page of this app. Let's hit enter, export default function summary page. And in here, this is basically going to return summary. Save that and let's import that here as well. There we go. So now we need to create this layouts. Now, since this is the layout of our app, I'm going to create another directory and I'm going to call it layouts. I'm just going to say layouts just in case you have another layout in here as well, but you could keep it as layout singular as well. But the convention is to just write layouts in there. And now we're going to create a component that is going to be called layout.tsx. And the job of this layout.tsx is to basically, again, provide the layout for our application. So in here, as with any other component, the first thing that you should do is you should just write the syntax for that component. And this is layout. Now, what is this layout going to return? This is not going to return like a simple word, like or a string. We want this to return our progress indicator, and depending on which step we are, we want to show the specific content for our app. Now, the way that I'm going to go with these is with these kind of JSX or HTML is I always put them inside of a main container or inside of a main element, just to make sure that the code or the HTML is semantic. Now we're going to open up a fragment in here. Well, not that we need this. We can just go ahead and create the main element. This main element is going to show something that is going to be called progress indicator. We're yet to create this, but then when we have the progress indicator, this is going to be unique for all pages, but it is going to be shown for all pages as well. So this is going to be something that is going to be different depending on which page we are, but nonetheless, it will be there. But when it comes to the content right here, if I go to the personal, I have this info, I have the personal information, I have all of this. But then if I click on next, if I go to the address, I have all of this. They are clearly different. The HTML is different, the content is different. We have 2 buttons in the bottom. So if I go to the next page, this is completely different than the previous 2 pages. But you can see our progress indicator, even though the styles change, the actual indicator stays the same. The content stays the same. We just add a little bit of styling to it. And finally, we have our summary page right there. So you can see everything is different. Now, to be able to implement this using React Router, we have something that is called outlet. This is going to play the role of a placeholder depending on which page we are. So all the content that we write for the address page, personal info page, preferences page, summary page, this is going to replace all of that. All of that is going to come right here. That's why this is called a placeholder. And this, in fact, is a component that is given to us by React Router DOM. And now let's save this. I need to create this progress indicator. Now, progress indicator is not a page. It's not a layout. So what is it? It's a component, right? So I'm going to go to my source, and in here I'm going to right click. I'm going to say components. I always mistype this, components. And for our components, right click, new file. basically this progress indicator is going to come right here, dot tsx. And what is this going to show for now? This is basically going to show function progress. Whoops. Copy this, put it right here. This is just going to show progress indicator. Progress. Let's save that. And let's import it here as well. And there we go. And after this, we're going to go to our app and we're going to basically try to implement all of this routing. And in case you're wondering, why is this looking different? I just remember that I lost my icons. So I just set up icons just very quickly right now. And if you want to take a look at the icons that I'm using, it is the, it's this one, this icons. And this is basically, if you just click on it, you should install it. And then if you just click on it, you're going to see icons. Just click on there and it's going to implement it for you. Get rid of that. Let's come right here. I just saw that I don't have the icons. Just noticed that. So here we have the layout done, but before moving outside of the layout, I am going to put in these classes for the layout. Now, the idea is we are talking about useReducer, a little bit about React Router as well. I don't want to focus too much on the Tailwind part of it because that's besides the point. I have a lot of content here on my channel for Tailwind. If you are interested, you can just go ahead and watch them. So let's just close this. Let's come back to our application. Let's import the layout. And now what we want to do in here is we want to make sure that all of these routes, they surround our entire application. And for that, we have a method inside of our React router, which is called create browser router. First off, what is this saying? Expected comma. Let's just provide a comma and there we go. So I'm going to come right here to the bottom and I'm going to say create browser router from, we import this basically from the React Router DOM library. And we are going to pass in all of our routes to this one. What is this going to give us? This is going to give us an object that is called router. And let's initialize that as well. And this router is going to be the object that we're going to pass in to something that is called, let's just write it in here. This is called router provider. We import this from React Router as well. And as the router, we pass in the router that we created, this one right here. And now let's close this as well. Let's save that. And our app should be working. And there we go. We have the progress and then we have the personal. So if I go to the address, we have the progress and the address. What else do we have? We have the preferences. These names that I'm writing are actually coming from the paths that we have imported, that we have written here. So if I just copy that, put it right here and hit enter, it goes to preferences. And finally, we have the summary, goes to summary. But then if you go to any other path that doesn't exist, like summary 1, 2, 3, you're going to see this 404. And before going forward and actually implementing each of these pages separately, I am going to implement this not found page. And for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a section element. The section element is going to have an h1, and the h1 is going to say not found. There are some styles that I want to apply on this one. Let's copy all of that, put it right there. And we're going to have all of these styles put there. Let's get rid of these parentheses. We don't really need them. And let's get rid of that as well. Let's put it, you know what? Let me get rid of this. Just cut it, put it on one line, save that, and there we go. So if you go to any page that doesn't exist, like somewhere, any other page, you're going to see this not found. And didn't I copy the styles for the h1? Thought I did. There we go. Just a little bit bigger. Now that not found is done, what do we want to do next? We want to be able to go to our home page and not see this. We want to go to the home page and be able to see this. So let's go ahead and let's implement that. Where is our home page? The home page is this personal info page right here. And inside of this personal info page, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with the JSX, and that's my suggestion for you as well. Whenever you are creating a component and you're not sure how to go about it, just go ahead and return the JSX, because JSX is HTML. It's simpler than React and all the other parts. So HTML, what kind of an HTML do you want to see? So I want to see the progress indicator, which I'm not going to work on for now. We're going to create all 4 pages and then we're going to jump to our progress. So I am focusing more on this personal info. I'm focusing on this. So this is a form. It has a title. There are several input fields and they have labels, like we have this first name and then we have an input for John. And then we have this last name, and then we have this email. Now I know this. I know this is type text, and this is type email. And then this could be an input or a button that is going to basically say submit and go to the next page. So you can see this is simpler to understand and to write. And then as you're writing this HTML, you're going to basically write inside of it. You're going to mix it with JavaScript and then it becomes JSX. Let's go ahead and let's come right here. So for this one, I am going to have a form element. Remember, we have a form element. And this form is going to have, we have 3 different labels with inputs. So there are 2 elements. So when I have 2 elements, it's just better if I just put it inside of a div. The first one is going to be for first name. And what is this going to say? This is going to say first name right there. Let's just put it there. And we're going to have an input. What should be the type of the input? The type of the input is going to be text. It's going to have an ID. The ID is going to be the same thing as the for attribute for that label. So we know that this label belongs to this input. And we are going to say required. So we're just taking care of the HTML part for now. Now, this is the first name. We have 2 more to go. We have one for last name. That's easier to do. Last name. The type is going to be text as well. Let me capitalize this L. And then the ID, last name, okay. But this is going to be email. Let's say email, and the type is going to be email as well. And this is going to say email. Save that. Let's come right here. You can see it's taking shape. Since we're using Tailwind, there are some styles that are being applied on our inputs, but then I'm going to apply the rest of the styles. Right now, I'm just going to hit the pause button. I'm going to apply the styles and we're going to come back. And there we go. You can see it looks already better. We have an H1 in here as well. That is going to say personal information. Let's copy that text from there, put it right here. Let's save this. And finally, we have some styles for our H1 as well. So this is the first step you should go with, because this indicates that you have come up with the HTML. And now the only thing remaining is for you to actually implement the functionality. But before doing that, sorry, one last thing, and that is our button. The button is going to say next. The button is going to submit this form. So the type of this is going to be submit. And then there are going to be, of course, some rudimentary classes applied for styles as well. There we go. We got our button. So just some styles to make sure that this form looks a little bit decent. So what do we want to do here? Now, when I type something in here and I click on next, I should be able to hold all of this information. I should make sure that React has access to this so it holds it or keeps it when I'm going to the next route, and then I go to the next route and next route. And when I go to the final route, I'm going to ask React, okay, I gave you some information, give that to me. All right. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to change our website, the way our website looks with that information. So the way you can change the look of a website with React is two ways. You could use a useState hook. You need to change the state. The state is called a component's memory. So the way a component tracks information, it holds information, that's a state. How can you manipulate state in React? You have two ways. You have useState and then you have useReducer. Now, since this video is relating to useReducer, we're going to use that. Now, when it comes to useReducer works differently than useState. There are some overlaps, but at the end of the day, useReducer is the use case for that is much more complex situations, perhaps more complex than this one, but this serves as a very basic example of how to come up with this useReducer and how to think about this useReducer and how to work with it. Now in here, what I want to do is I want to make sure that React has access to what the user writes in here. Now keep in mind, we're going step by step. How do I make sure that React has access to what the user has written? Now, on each inputs from my JavaScript knowledge, I know that I have actions. So once the user interacts with my website, whatever the user does, in the world of JavaScript, that is called an event. You know that, right? And we listen to those events and we do something based on what event our application receives, whether that's a click of a mouse or the pressing of a key on the keyboard. And we can track all of these events. When it comes to the input elements, we just click in there and you can see the style changes there, but then we hit tab and then we just keep typing and typing. So all of these are change events for our input. So the way we can track these is using the change event. And I'm going to say on change. This is going to track how many times the user has hit any key on the keyboard and what the user actually has clicked on. So is it J? Is it H? Is it G? Is it F? What was that? We can keep track of that using this on change. Now that you know what on change is, what we want to do is we want to send this to React. We want to give it to React. But how do we want to give it? We could go with useState or useReducer. So we're going to use useReducer. When you use the reducer syntax, there is some things that you need to keep in mind because useReducer hook requires that. Now, we talked about everything the user does is an event. So I'm just going to write their event. Now, this onChange handler is going to run a function for me, an arrow function. The arrow function has one parameter that is E, and then once this arrow function runs, we are going to call a method that is called dispatch. And this dispatch is given to us by useReducer. Dispatch. Now, what is this dispatch? What is the literal meaning of dispatch? To send something, right? That's the meaning of dispatch. And that's exactly what this does. So this dispatch is a part of our useReducer function. And the job of this is to send actions to our useReducer function. To our reducer function, I shouldn't say useReducer because useReducer is the hook. I'm going to uncomplicate all of this in just a few minutes. So just please bear with me. So this dispatch sends an action. What is the action? Well, it depends on where the user clicks. So if the user clicks on the first name, the action is the first name. And if the user clicks on the last name, that's the last name, and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to every individual action, we need to distinguish where that action belongs. So we need to give it some sort of a type. And the type that I'm going to give this is going to be update underscore personal underscore info. This is the type of the action. And what do we want to send with this action, with this dispatch? That's called payload. Payload. That's the action that we are sending. Now, the reason we say payload, that's because that's the syntax that's required from us to write there. Now, this first name is an object, remember? So we're going to have first name. And what is that equal to? How do we get whatever the user has written there? We know from our knowledge of JavaScript, if we say e.target.value, we get exactly what the user has typed. And there we go. And that's it. So we send the value that the user types. Now keep in mind, every time the user hits the every time the user presses the keyboard, we send that. We don't wait until it's finished. We send it every time it is being pressed. This is being called because keep in mind, the reason for that is because we're using this onChange. The onChange is triggered whenever the input changes, whether that's a space or a single character or a number, whatever. When the input changes, this onChange is going to trigger this dispatch. And now that we have done this for our first name, let's go ahead and let's implement this for the last name. I'm going to come right here, put it there. This is dispatch update personal info, but instead of first name, I'm going to say last name. And finally, for the email, now you can see it is making sense. It is email. Now, we decided to send whatever the user types inside of our inputs to useReducer, to React in general. Now, once we do that, it means we gave the value, but we didn't receive anything in return, because this is like a passing of information. I give React some value, and I tell React, okay, keep that in mind. When I ask you, give it to me. Now, once I send that to React, I need to show it to the user as well. How do I show that? So if I come right here, if I get rid of all of that, I say J. J goes to the useReducer function and then comes back. Why do we do this? Because we wanted to keep that in mind. That's why. And then we show it inside of our website. Now, this happens extremely fast, but that's what is happening. That's what's happening behind the scenes. There we go. The same thing happens for J, for O, for H, and for N. We give it to React and we get it back. And how do we get back? We have another property, another attribute rather here that is called the value. And how do we have access to this value that comes back from our useReducer? It is available on something called state. So if I say state.firstName, I am going to get the first name. Where are these coming from? I'm going to show you that in just a few minutes. So don't worry about it. So this is the first name. And then we have the last name. Let's just change this to last name. And finally, we have the email. Now that our inputs are actually hooked up with React, they're in sync with React, there is a lot of errors and I shouldn't have saved. That's why it says page not found. Now that all of this are in sync with React, let's take a look at our useReducer hook. So I'm going to say useReducer. I've just imported that from React. Now keep in mind, when it comes to useReducer, it returns some things, but then it accepts some things as well. All right. Now, what this useReducer accepts is something called a reducer function. And I'm gonna explain why they decided to go with this reducer word. Why is it called reducer in the first place? I'm going to explain that to you in just a few seconds. So it accepts a reducer function as well as an initial state. I mean, you have heard that, right? Before somewhere with our use state, the use state, it accepts an initial state as well. So that's where these two overlap. But then the use state did not accept a reducer function, but this accepts a reducer function. So the reducer function is going to be something that refers to our reducer. It is the personal info. So I'm just going to call it personal info. Instead of page, I'm going to say reducer. That's our reducer function. But then we need to provide an initial state as well. Personal. We have initial personal info state. What is this initial state? Well, initially, once you go to this page, there is nothing. So there shouldn't be anything. And there we go. The input for first name is empty, for last name is empty, and for email is empty. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this, and let's complete this before taking a look at what this useReducer returns. So if I come right here, this personal info, initial personal info state, this is our initial state. So I am going to create this const personal info state, and I am going to type annotate this with something in just a moment. But for now, what should this have? We have 3 inputs. So I have first name. This is empty initially because we're talking about initial state. We have last. I could just get this part. We have the last name, and we have the email. And there we go. So you can see our initial state that we pass in right here, it has the first name, the last name, and the email, which are empty. Now that we have created the initial state, let's first take a look at what this useReducer returns, and then we're gonna basically complete the rest of the equation when it comes to this hook. So useReducer returns 2 things. It gives us something that's called state, the current state. Now, we said that we send the info to our useReducer hook. useReducer hook or React, it basically keeps that in mind, changes that if you want it, depending on what kind of a reducer function that we pass in. But then it gives us that state because we want to show it to the user. And there we go. We got this value state, that first name. So that's something that this useReducer returns as an array. Now, the first parameter or the first item of this array is that state. And the second thing that this useReducer returns is that dispatch method that comes from our useReducer as well. And there we go. And there we go. We got that right here. And now what we need to do is we need to create our reducer function, as well as we need to come up with a more general way of type annotating our initial state. So if I hover on this, you can see we have this object notation. This is called a type inference. The type has been inferred by TypeScript. That's okay. But at the end of the day, when we complete this application, we want all the types to be involved in one giant type so we can take a look at that better. We can manage that better. And we don't want this to be inferred. Let's go ahead and let's actually create the type for it. So in here, I'm going to say interface. As you know, I love interfaces. So I'm going to say interface. So this interface is going to be responsible for type annotating all of the form data. And that's why I'm just going to call it form data. We are within the personal info page. So I'm going to say personal info. And within this page, we have the following types. Let me select all 3, put them right here. And instead of these quotes, I'm going to say all of them have a type of string. Now that they have a type of string, let's type annotate this with our personal info. So I'm going to come right here. I'm going to say form data. And then from form data, I'm going to select this personal info. And let's save that. And there we go. And now you can see everything is coming nicely together. And I wanted to, when I thought of teaching useReducer, I wanted to teach it in a way that is a little bit different, but actually makes sense. I know I went in reverse and I should have created all of these first. I should have first gone with the useReducer hook, and I should have first talked about what it returns and what it accepts. What is this reducer word, why we need it. But then that doesn't show why we need this hook in the first place. I know at the end of the day, in both ways, you will learn how useReducer works, but you will always have this feeling like, why do I even need this? I know how it works, what it does, but do I really need this over use state? So what I did was first I created a demand for that reducer, and then I created this reducer, this useReducer. So now let's talk about why they chose this reduce name. Why is it saying reduce? It should say some sort of use state, perhaps use state version 2 or use state but more powerful, something like that. But they selected useReducer. Like superficially on the surface, it seems like it doesn't have anything to do with state, because use state clearly says state, but it says reduce. Now, this is very interesting because if you take a look at an array in pure JavaScript, so this is an array. If I hit the dot notation, if I hit the dot and using this dot notation, we get all of these methods that are available on an array. So keep in mind, what is an array? An array is a collection of data, but that collection just has items. It does have indices under the hood, but we take a look at the items. So you have a group of something, a pair of something, you have all of that, a list of something, that's your array. And you have all of these methods to be able to manipulate what you have within that array. And among these, there is a method that is called reduce. And this function, this method is extremely important. And in here it says a function that accepts up to 4 arguments. The reduce method calls the callback function one time for each element. So this says how it works. Now, in here it says calls the specified callback function for all the elements in an array. Okay, again, what it does. The return value of the callback function is the accumulated result. Keep this in mind, this one right here, and is provided as an argument in the next call to the callback function. So you can just take a look at this and read more about this. So what this basically says is it does something on every individual array item, but then it has this accumulated result. What does this mean? It means it selects a lot of items and it reduces them to something that is less than all of those items in number. I mean, for example, it selects 10 items and it produces 1 item. So, I mean, it reduces the number of stuff you have within that array by doing something on all of those array items. So that's what the reduce method does. And useReducer hook does the same thing in React for our inputs. In this scenario, we have used useReducer. So it selects all of this information, the first name, the last name, the email, and using a reducer method, it reduces all of that to something that we want. And what do we want? We want to retain this information when we go to our next route. So all of this is being reduced to one single accumulated result. And that's why they called it useReducer, because that in fact comes from the reduce method of that we have in regular good old JavaScript that we have for our arrays. So that's why it's called reducer. So whenever you see reducer, just keep in mind the basis for this hook is that method for our arrays that we have in JavaScript. That's the basis for this. So this reducer function that I'm about to create right now, this should give me some sort of this should give me, I shouldn't put it outside of our function, because at the end of the day, this should be a functional component. So in here, we have this reducer function, and the job of this reducer function is to grab all the information, but generate one accumulated result, one final result. And we are talking about React. We want to show something to the user. What is that accumulated result? What is that final thing? That's the state. So the reducer function of a reducer hook grabs an action or basically receives an action using the action that is being dispatched from our dispatch method. It receives it, it calculates the state, and it returns the next state. Hence, it re-renders our UI. And that's where useReducer and useState are the same. Both of them re-render the UI. After all of this, it's time for us to actually get started with creating this reducer function. This reducer function is going to receive two parameters. One is going to be the state. We know that it is going to receive state because it needs to calculate the changes in the state, and once it detects that change in the state, it re-renders the UI to show the updated UI, the updated website. So, but before doing that, this state for a reducer function, it should know what the initial state is. Now, I'm going to go over these terminologies a little bit just once more. We have this useReducer. Anything in React that has this use word in front of it, that's a hook. That's a hook. Hooks are methods in React. All of them are methods. But this, it's called a React hook. The reason for it is because we basically hook into React to grab some sort of a functionality from React. That's why they called it hook. Like you hook into React and grab something from it. So that's the useReducer hook. But this function that I'm trying to create here, this is not a hook. This is the reducer function. This is the reducer function. All right? Now that we are on the same page, let's pass in the initial state in here. So it's going to be initial personal. Let me just get it from here. Let's pass that right there. And after that, the second parameter that this is going to accept is going to be action. And what is this action? The action is something that the dispatch method sent. So the action is something that is going to change the state. So we have this initial state. How do you change it? You need to know what changed in the UI. Well, how do you know that? Let's trace our steps. What did we do? We said we have this dispatch method. We have this dispatch method right here. The job of this was to send this payload, which is aka action, to our reducer function. What is this payload? The payload is tracking our first name input for all the changes, JOHN. Okay, it sends all of this info to our personal info reducer. That's our action. And once we receive that, keep in mind, we need to get the state from the useReducer back so we can show it in the UI. And that's why you can see we have state.firstName. That's available on the state. And then this reducer function, this is going to calculate the next state. What was the first state? The first state is this initial state where everything is empty. We have this empty quotes. And what is the next state? The next state is J. And once I hit O, the next state is O. And then keep in mind, once we re-render the UI, we keep the previous states. It's not like once I type J and then I type O, I get rid of J and now I have only O, and then I have only H, and then I have only N. Where is the first name? There is no first name. And it rhymes, and I feel like I'm a rapper. So here, we're going to have an action. What is going to be the type of this action? Well, it should have some sort of a type, right? And I'm going to call it form action, right? Very genius. And let's create this right here. So first off, let's go ahead and let's create this type, because as you can see, we have this type in here, which is, we have the type and the payload, which we did not actually type annotate. So I'm going to come right here, and in here, I'm going to say interface. And I could say interface, I could use a type. I'm going to use an interface. This is going to be form action. And on this form action, we have a type. What is the type? Keep that in mind. We specified that because once we go to our next pages, this type is going to be different. This is the type. And we do have a payload in here as well, right? What is the type of payload? Think about it. I'm going to give you like a couple of seconds to pause the video. What is the type of payload? I hope you paused the video and you thought about it, because this thinking is really, really, really important. So the payload is different. We have the payload here for the first name. The payload is whatever the first name is. But then we have another payload here, last name. And okay, there is 2 T's. There should be 1. And then we have another payload, which is the email. So we have 3 different payloads. Does that mean we need to create 3 different reducers? No, that's the job of one reducer. Remember, we grab all of this info and we generate one thing from it, one accumulated result. If I have 3 reducers, then what is the point of using a reducer? I didn't reduce anything. So I should have one reducer to grab all of these 3 payloads and generate one accumulated result for me. And that's why we're going to use one of them. So in here, if I'm using this information, shouldn't I just extend this type and use it right here? I should be able to do that, right? So in here, I have this personal info. So I could use the partial type of TypeScript. Now the partial is going to make all types optional. I'm gonna pass in the form data, and what do I want to grab from the form data? I'm gonna grab the personal info. Let's save this. If I hover on this, it says initial personal first state refers to a value, but it is being used as a type here. Did you mean we don't want to use it as a type? This is a value, so this is an equal sign. So we have our state, which is equal to this one. And let's go ahead and let's create the rest of this. So what is the job of this reducer? We grab all of this information and we return something from this. What do we want to return? Now, keep in mind, I said we need to keep the previous state and then generate the new state. Let's keep the previous state and generate the new state. Action dot, we have action dot, what do we have on the action? We have payload. And let's save that. All of the errors are gone. If I reload the page, there we go. Everything is okay. Let's go to our inspect. Let's type. So I'm going to say, I don't know, like Jane. And there we go. It works. Perfect. And we have Doe. And then we have some sort of JD or Jane Doe at gmail.com. Everything works perfectly fine. Now that we're done with the personal info page, it's time to move forward to our address page. But currently we have not implemented any way of navigating to that page. So if I click on this next, since this is a button that has a type of submit, this is just going to submit the information. It's going to basically make everything, reset everything. So let's come right here. Let's write Jane Doe, and in here I'm going to say Jane Doe at Gmail. Now I want to be able to click this, which means I'm triggering a submit event, and then I should go to that next route inside of this child routes, inside the child routes that we have. So we need to go ahead and we need to implement that. Now I'm going to come right here, since we are going to basically grab something from our React router DOM, which is some sort of a hook. Hooks should be top level. So I could either write it above this reducer or below it. Since we implemented the reducer first, let's just write it beneath here. So we have this use navigate hook from React router DOM, which is just inserted or imported. And on this one, we have a navigate function. I'm going to call it navigate. So this navigate is going to be a function that is going to allow us to click this next and go to the next page. Now, when do we want to basically invoke this? When we click on this next. And with our current implementation, we don't handle that on submit event. So we did say the button has a type of submit, but on the form, we need to actually catch that event. And the event is caught using this on submit, where we're going to write When we say on submit, we want to run some sort of a function. So the name of the function is arbitrary. You could call it handle submit. You could say next page. I could say next page. It doesn't really matter. So now that I've created that, let's actually define this next page. Since this is just going to take our user to the next page, it's fitting if we just call it this. The first thing that I want to do is prevent the default behavior. Let's pass in our e object here, and I'm going to say e.prevent default. Come on, default. The reason for this is once you hit submit on any form in HTML, the default behavior is it refreshes the page. We don't want to refresh the page. That's why we use React Router. So we say e.prevent default to prevent that. We need to type annotate this. This is React. What kind of an event? This is a form event. And then we're going to grab our navigate method, and we need to determine where we want to navigate to. So we know we go to / something. If I come to our routes, we want to go to / address. So let me double click, copy that, put it right here, save this. Now if I click next, I need to fill these out. Let's say John Doe test whatever. Next, and there we go. So we got to our address, and now it's time for us to write the content or the HTML content for this page. This is going to be extremely simple because we already know what it is we want to do. So we are going to have from the top, we're going to have our form data, but instead of personal info, we're going to say address. We're going to have our form action. We are going to have an initial state. And what is going to be that initial state? So if I go to the next page, the initial state is going to be street address empty, city address empty, and then zip code empty. We're going to have our basically our useReducer hook, which is going to have the same architecture, as I would say. And we will have our navigate. We will have a function that is going to act as our reducer function, which is going to update the state, and the rest of the stuff is basically our JSX. So it's extremely similar to what we did there. Now, what I could do is I could save you the trouble. I could just copy all of that and put it right here. And now we could go from the top to bottom and really change what it is that we want to change. So the H1 is going to change from personal information to address details. We're going to keep this form as next page. The on submit is going to be next page because we still want to go to the next page. What else do we have? The structure of the HTML is the same. We have our label, which is for first name, but we want this to be for street. And the input ID should say street as well. And the label is going to read street address. Let's come down to our on change. So we are still going to use dispatch because we want to send our action in the form of payload. The payload is no longer referred to first name. It will be street. So that's what we send to our reducer function. And we get state.street from our reducer function. And this is required, so that part is done. After street, we have city. So instead of last name, I'm going to say city. And our payload, let me just copy that. This is going to be city as well. And we need to change the text. I could just put it right here and capitalize the first letter. What else? This is city, and yeah, we should be good to go. Next up, we have our zip code. And for HTML4, I'm just going to say, in here, I'm going to say zip. Copy that. That's going to be the ID, state.zip, and we're going to say zip e.target.value. And this is going to read zip code. Save this. We still have a lot of errors. That's why it says not found. And the button is going to say next. But in here, we have like another button as well. That is going to be previous button. These two are going to be different. So the first button is going to say back. It's going to go back. And on this button, what we want to do is we want to implement an on click, because once I click this, I go back. And I go back one step inside of my route, right? So instead of type submit, we're going to say on click. Now, if you want to capture clicking, that's on click. And once the click happens, we're going to call our navigate function, which we are yet to create. And where do we want to navigate? We want to navigate to the home page. And let me go up. So beneath here, we need to grab all of this information. So we have this function, we have our personal info reducer. This is going to look a lot like our address reducer. So I could just copy it from here. It makes no sense if I waste your time with all of this. We talked about them pretty extensively. So we have our useReducer. Let's import that. We have our initial state, which we are yet to create. Let's get this one as well. So this part is done. Now, if we navigate from address, where do we want to go? We want to go to preferences. So we need to fix this. This is going to be preferences. And let's go up. We have our personal info reducer. This is going to be address info reducer. Let's just copy that, put it right there. So I'm going to come right here. I'm going to copy all three of these types. Don't worry, once we complete the app, we're going to get to our refactoring, and we're going to basically refactor using the context API. And I'm going to show you how you can just create one context, put all the logic there, and we're going to also extract away reducers from individual component pages as well, just so all of the reducer logic is in some place, and we are going to import it here. For now, everything is component specific. So the address page doesn't know, aside from this navigate, it doesn't know that the personal info page exists. But then, so the logic is separate, but when we refactor the code, we're going to combine all of them. So this is going to say initial address info. And did I type it correctly? Yes. Let's just copy it. It's going to come right here, and it's going to come right here. So for our initial address, we have a street, which is going to be a string. Then we're going to have a city, which is going to be a string, a zip code, which is going to be a string as well. So street. Let's come to here. We need to specify them here as well. And here. And I'm going to select all three, and I'm going to say, okay, all of them are going to have type of string. Now, this is no longer going to be personal info. This is going to be address info. Address, and I need to capitalize this. And let me just copy this because we didn't fix that in here. So we go to the top. This is the street address. I'm going to select this, select all three of them, and I'm just going to put it there. So what else do we have here? Zip code. And if I go to the top, since we use zip code, I should send that as a payload from here as well. Zip code. There is just one error, and that error is right here. Zip code. Okay, what else do we want? I hope this doesn't like makes you dizzy. All the up and down, going up and down. So from the top, we have our form data right here. We have the form action, address info, very good. the initial address info state. We pass that to here to useReducer. We have the reducer function. So the reducer function is basically going to grab our state. Now what it does is the same thing. It selects the initial state, and based on the action that it has received, it's going to calculate the next state. So this is nothing. So what happens here, it's not specific to every individual page. It's general what the reducer does. Right? So we are not going to change that. Should be good to go. So if I come to my completed app, there we go. The styles are missing for our div. And let me just, okay, so these two have to be within a div. So I can do Control-Shift-P, wrap, div, and there we go. Save that. Very cool. So I could say this is the address. And if I click next, it should go to the preferences page. Okay, the type email. Didn't we fix this? Okay, the type of this should be text. And what else do we have? So the city type text. Okay, next, there we go. So we got there. Let's go back. Let's try to complete this. Next. There we go. And then from here, we can say next as well. And now we are in the preferences page. And you can see it's simple. Once you understand the actual hook, how it works, what you need for prerequisites of the hook, which are the reducer and the initial state, and what the hook generates, which is the next state, technically the current state, as well as the dispatch, which eventually is going to be used to decide the next state. It's very simple, right? And I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to keep the address page. Let's open up our preferences page. Now for our preferences, just collapse this. We could select the stuff from here. We could select the JSX. Let's just copy it. There are going to be some changes, of course, but there are going to be some semantic similarities as well. So if I go to the top, we're going to fix this from top to bottom. Before fixing that, let's grab our next page as well as this reducer as well as the hook. Before moving further down, let me put all of that there. I'm going to import the useReducer as well as the useNavigate. And useNavigate is a React Router DOM hook. And what do we have here? Let's select this. Let's put it right here. And what else do I want to do here? So we have the address info. Instead of this, I'm going to say preferences. I'm going to copy this. This is going to be preferences. We're going to have initial preferences state. And this P should be capital. Initial preferences state. I'm going to copy this, put that right here, and put that right here. And again, when it comes to our reducer function, what it is going to do is it's general. It's going to select the previous state, calculate the next state based on what kind of an action it has received. Now, inside of our preferences, this is going to be different because if I go to my preferences, let's go there. Let's see what is happening here. If I come right here, we have 2 checkboxes and 2 radio buttons because at no time I want the user to be able to select both dark and light. That's why these are radio buttons, so only one of them are selected. But checkboxes, both of them could be selected or none of them. That's the difference, all right? That's why I used checkboxes here and I used radio buttons here. That's the difference. That's how you know where to use which. And so how are we going to go about this? If I reload the page, and since I'm right here, you can see by default, I am checking the notifications, and the radio button is on the dark. So we have some default preferences when it comes to our notification newsletter as well as the theme. Now let's actually go ahead and get started with that, and we need to reflect that here as well. So I will have newsletter. The type of newsletter is going to be, do you select it or you don't select it? So you check it, you tick it, or you don't. So it's going to be like one of the two, which is Boolean. It's not going to be string. Well, next up, I'm going to have notifications. Notification is going to be the same thing. You either select it or not. So it's going to be Boolean. And then what do I have after that? I have the theme. Now, how many options do I have within the theme? I have two options. So I could use literal types in TypeScript. I could have light or dark. Now keep in mind, I'm using a union type, not an intersection type. So union type, like this pipe character that we have, it says one of these two, either light or dark, but an intersection says both of them. So you need to be able to like differentiate which type operator to use where. After that, we are going to change our form action. It's no longer going to say update address info. It's basically going to say update preferences. Okay. And the rest is okay. In here, we no longer have those, city, street, and zip code. We have these. But here, since this is the initial preferences state, we need to specify what initial state for each of these preferences we want to select. And initially, the newsletter is going to have a preference, an initial state of false. It means I'm not selecting it. For notification, the preference is going to be, the initial state is going to be, this should be comma. The initial state is going to be true, which means that initially the notification is selected, but what about the theme? Which theme is selected? It's dark. So the initial state for our theme is going to be dark. Let's come right here. What else do we have? So all of this is okay. Now, if I click on this form submit, next page should appear. And what is next page? That's our summary. So let's put that here. Now let's fix this. We no longer have our address details. We have our preferences. The styles are going to be a little bit different for this one. And let's come right here. So in here, we're going to have one label, but we're going to have one checkbox, and then another label, another checkbox. So let's first take care of the first label. I'm going to copy this, put it right here. This is no longer going to say street. This is going to say newsletter. So newsletter. And the ID of this is going to be newsletter. Now the type is going to go to checkbox. There we go. And the state is going to be state.newsletter. There we go. And this should be newsletter. The type, we need to fix the type. Let me copy the type. Where was the type? Whoops. Sorry. Where is the type for this one? The type is above right here. There we go. Update preferences. Let me copy that. Update preferences. Put it there. And newsletter. Okay, what else is missing here? Should be okay. Now, since this is a checkbox, the problem is checkboxes don't have .value. Since we said we want it to be a Boolean, true or false, we need to select that state as well here, and that's going to be .checked. So checked, true, unchecked, false. This part is done. We have our state.newsletter. Now again, we still have the value here. This should be the checked. There we go. So this part, the first one is done. I collapse that. I'm going to copy it, put it down below. Let's collapse this newsletter. After newsletter, we have our notifications. So why not just copy it from there, put it there, get rid of the large N or the capital N. Where do I want to put it there? Put that there. And since we have type annotated everything, if I say state dot, we're going to have our notifications and paste it here as well. Okay. What else do we need? What else do we need? Should be okay. Notifications. This does not exist in type notifications. Boolean theme. Did you mean notifications? Oh, I mistyped that there. Whoops. That's a typo. Notifications. Put it there. Paste, and paste. This one should be capital. Save this. And what else seems to be the problem? So the first two are completed, and we need to go to our theme preference. For that, what I'm going to do is, so we completed notification. I'm going to collapse this, collapse the city, collapse the zip code. I'm going to get rid of the city and zip code, but I'm going to keep these two buttons because we're going to need them. So I hope you're not getting confused. It's extremely simple. This first div, this is our newsletter. The second div is our notifications. And then we need to create theme preference. And then we have our buttons, which are the next and the previous. So next is going to submit the form. The previous is going to go to the previous, which is address. I'm going to collapse this so we don't have to worry about it. Now in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div, and within this div, we are going to have a label for our theme preference. So this is going to be, this is what's going to say theme preference right here. And then this label is going to have two radio buttons. Theme, I'm just going to call it theme. Since radio buttons, they don't have any kind of text involved with them, we're going to use a div to combine an input, which is radio button, with a span element. So they act as a whole, right? And this in here, we could basically select any of the inputs that we have created here. I'm just going to select this one, and then I'm going to collapse that. We are going to have our input. The input type is going to be radio. And this is going to basically say theme. The ID is going to be theme. We are going to have a value here, and we're going to set it to a fixed string of light. And state is going to be equal to, let's say, state.theme is going to be equal to what? It's going to be equal to light. There we go. And what do we send as the payload? It's going to be theme. It's going to be theme e.target.value and undefined. Type string is not type undefined. So in here, I need to assert the type. I'm going to say the type is going to be either light or dark. Cool. What else do I need to do here? These styles are not going to work because these are not for our checkboxes. So first, let's, complete this. So we created this div, and after this input, I need to provide, come on, buddy, a span element. In here, I'm going to say span, and this is going to say light. Save, or we shouldn't be able to, oh, we do see something. There we go. So by default, you can see it's tick marked, it's ticked. And this is our light. Very good. Span. Let's save that. I'm going to copy this div once more because we have that dark, remember? So anywhere there is light, we are going to say dark. So dark. But keep in mind, once you are type asserting this, the type could be light or dark. So don't change both of them to dark. Save this, and now we have the dark. Oh, where is the light? I think I did Control Z in the process. Whoops, sorry. Let's just copy it down below. So that's the dark, and this is the light, and this should say light. Right, so we are done with the dark, with the light as well as the dark. The styles are remaining, but for that I'm going to go to our first checkbox, which is this notification, and I'm going to apply the styles. I'm going to hit the pause button, apply the styles, and I'm going to come back. And there we go. All the styles are applied. Now I did say I'm going to show you how to do this, so let's go ahead and let's go over these styles. I'm going to grab our first input. Now, when it comes to checkboxes, as you saw in like a few seconds ago, checkboxes look like that in HTML by default. And there is this class appearance none. If you do this class on any HTML element, it's not going to show. It's going to get rid of its original appearance. And once you get rid of the original appearance, you craft a new appearance for it. And typically it's a good practice if you get started with the size. So size is 5, which is 20 pixels. There is a background color for it, and there is a hover state on it. Rounded full basically says that it should be a circle. That's what rounded full says. We have, when we check this tick mark or this checkbox, this should be the color. With Tailwind CSS, this is extremely simple. With simple CSS, it's a little bit back and forth going, but Tailwind CSS, that makes it super simple and right in place. And then there is a duration of 75 because I want it to be a little bit snappy, but still smooth. And finally, we have this cursor pointer to tell the user that this is sort of clickable. Now, sometimes somewhere you can see that if you even click on this text, that changes that as well. And that happens here as well. So even if I click on this text, you can see it changes that tick mark. But then there is no indication for the user to know that they can click on this text as well. And to fix that, what you can do is you can come to this label and you're going to say cursor pointer. Save that. Now the user knows where they can click. So let's just copy that and put it for this label as well. There we go. See, you could click there or there. It is going to work. We are progressing very nicely with our application. The final page that we need to take care of is our summary page. So if I click on this, please, if you want to proceed. Now, let's get rid of these requireds. Save this. If I click on next, you can see it goes to summary. But the problem is that if I go to the previous pages, if I go back, so let me just show you what the problem is. Let's go to next. Let's go back. Where is the content? We didn't refresh anything, but where is the content? So we lost that, right? Now, I can't retain information between 2 steps. How am I going to retain them between 4 steps? So here we have that, and then I have that. Now, if I come to a summary, since I don't have access to the information, I lost it. I don't have anything to show in the summary. So this means that the state of our application doesn't have a central point. Even though it is okay for components logic to be confined to that specific component, but when they deal with data, the data should be shared across components. And this is something that we call lifting state up in order to solve this issue. And the problem with our current implementation is that if I lift the state up, it is going to go to its direct parent, which is the app component. But the app component is responsible for my routes, and I want to keep it like this. The reason that I did this is so I can show you where we use the context API. So the context API solves this problem for us. Instead of putting all this state-related information, which is the data, the name, last name, and all the others, putting them inside of our app component. We put them inside of the context and we share it from the context. That's the use case of the context. And if you're not familiar with the context API, the previous video in this tutorial series, React from Confusion to Clarity, there is a project in which that's the whole idea is getting to know the context API. You can just take a look at that and go through that video, and then you will be able to really understand what the context is. We use the context here, but the main focus is the reducer, not the actual context, even though I'm going to explain that as well. So we have that context, but now I know why I need that context. But the thing is, I have this progress that is staring at me for the past, that has been staring at me for the past hour or so, and I don't want to look at it anymore. So let's go ahead and let's get rid of this progress indicator, and then we are gonna go ahead and put everything, all the data in a central point, and we are gonna get started. Basically, after the progress, we are gonna refactor our application so it works, it looks better, the code is more organized, and you can see why we need that kind of refactoring. So I'm going to come right here to our progress indicator, and in here we're going to basically get started. So inside of the progress indicator's job is to take a look at 4 steps. I am going to create an array and I'm going to put all the steps in there. So this is going to be const steps. What are going to be these steps? Each step is going to be relating to a specific path. Now I'm hard coding this because I want to cross-reference this with something else. I'm going to tell you that in a moment. So we have a label, which is personal. That's the first path. And since this is a simple object, I could just put it on one line. Prettier is not going to mind that. Next up, I have address, and this is going to be the label for that one is going to be address. After that, let's select this. This is going to be preferences, and the label is going to say that as well. And finally, we have the summary. Capitalize the S, there we go. So we have these steps. We forgot to put in the comma. Save this, everything is okay. Now I have these steps and I'm going to basically cross-reference these steps with our React router. Now, depending on which page we are, we tick mark something. That's why we need to cross-reference. And how do I decide which page I'm on? I don't have to do that. React Router does it for me. So on React Router, we have this use location hook that I just imported from React Router. This use location hook's job is to give me something called a location object. The location object is going to tell me specifically on which path I am. And why do I want that? Because if I am on a further path, let's say right here, I am on the preferences, all the previous paths should have a tick mark and their color should be different. So take a closer look at this and tell me, what do you see? So let me highlight this again. What do you see? You see 3 different styles. So if the path is the current path, the style is this light orange or light coral, I would say, yeah. If the path has not been reached, the style is this light blue. But if the path has been crossed, that is the completed path. That is this yellow. So there are 3 different states that we need to take care of. Even though this looks simple, there is a lot of programming going into it to achieve this. Now we have this location. What am I going to do with this location? This location is going to give me something called path name, and that path name is something that I'm going to cross-reference with these. All right, so I'm going to say const, let's call this the variable that's going to hold the current path. I'm going to say current step index. I am going to grab our steps. I'm going to map over them, or you know what? Since I want to find the index, I could just say find index. And for every individual step, we're going to write step. And what am I going to do here? I'm going to say step dot. And as soon as I do dot, what do I have? I have a path and a label. Where is this coming from? It's coming from the object that I created here. So step dot path. If this is equal to location dot path name, then store that, whatever that is, store that index within the current step index. I just want to grab the index of that. Right? Cool. Let's move forward. So for this one, I'm going to create a section element. Within the section element, we want to do some kind of JavaScript thing. So we need to open up these curly braces. So I'm going to map over our steps, and I need to check two things: which step I'm on and what is the current index. Because we need to make sure which style we want to apply. And now here, this is really simple. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go over this. If we are on the current step, that means the index is equal to the index of the step is equal to the index that we got in our current step index. Then what do I want to do? I want to implement this style. Text. Since this is a custom style, I need to open up brackets. This is going to be F39 E60. F39 E60. I want to apply this style. Is that correct? Yeah, that should be correct. Now, if I'm not on this step, it means I have not reached that step. You might be asking, okay, it might be that you have crossed that step. No, I have not reached that step. So I'm going to say colon, right? Colon. And so when I have colon in front of this, I should have the question mark. Very good. So I'm going to have colon. This is not complete. I'm actually trying to complete it. Put that there. What is the style for the text or the color? That's 9AC BD0. That's why I copy paste. It takes too long. So this part is done. Current step, not yet reached step. But what if I've crossed that step? Now keep in mind, if you crossed it, that means the index of the step is smaller than the current index because you crossed it. That's behind you. In arrays, what is behind you? An item that has a smaller index. That's behind you. So you cross that step, right? And that's why we're going to say if index is less than current step index, then implement this style. What is that style? That's the yellow one that we want to do. So it is FFEB00. So if the step is passed, then apply this style. If I have not crossed this step, it means it's either the current step or the future step. So that comes within the or part of the ternary, the else part of the ternary operator. And this makes this a nested ternary operator. So again, let's just go over this so this is not confusing. If I've crossed the step, make the text yellow. Otherwise, it means I have not crossed the step. If I haven't crossed it, there are two options. Did I reach it or did I not reach it? If I've reached it, it means that's the current step. Then apply this style. If I didn't reach it, that means that's the future step. So apply that style. And this is how we do it. Now, of course, we need to implement this within a class, but this is how it works. That's the most difficult and the main part of it. The rest is extremely simple. And I wanted to get that out of the way so everything is clear. So I'm just going to push that down. and I'm gonna start working here. We need to specify key so React can keep track of this. The key is gonna be step.label. There we go. Let's create a figure element. Within the figure element, for the figure element, first I'm gonna have some styles. Since we're gonna do some conditional rendering, this should be JavaScript. And I'm gonna copy paste the styles not to waste too much of your time. So these styles, it doesn't matter on which step I am going to apply these styles. But then depending on which step we are, we're going to implement the styles within this template literal. So now I'm gonna cut all of this, put that right here, and save this. Very good. Everything is gone. We are gonna fix that. Let's just stay here. So that's our figure element. And what goes inside of the figure element. Now, within the figure element, we want to show two different icons, right? It's either going to be the circle or the circle that has a check mark within it. So it's going to be circle check circle 2. This comes from Lucid React. And then we have our circle icon from Lucid React as well. So if I take a look at that, save this, there we go. We got all of that. So we have, since we don't apply conditional rendering for the icons, you can see it shows both of these circles, the check one and the unchecked one. But the logic for the color of the circle is perfect. So we are in the address details page. That means we crossed one page. We are on a current page, and there are two future pages. The page that we crossed has a color of yellow. The page that we are on is coral, and the future pages are blue. The logic is okay, right? So what I need to do is I need to do the same kind of conditional rendering for these as well. So you see, conditional rendering. So I need to open up curly braces. Now, if index is, how do I know I crossed a step? It's simple. I just did that here. That means that's the previous index. So behind me, aka the index is smaller. So if the index is smaller, show this circle. Just cut it, put it right here. Otherwise, show this circle. And since I'm here, I am going to implement some styles as well, just to make sure we can see that. This is going to be size 8 for both of them. Save that. There we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We crossed that step. It's yellow. And if I go back to that step, you can see the styles, they change. Let's move forward. Whoops. And there we go, crossed it. And now come right here, crossed it, and there we go. Very cool, right? Let's go back, stay there. So what else do I want to do here? These should have some caption right here. So they should have some sort of a text. And since I'm a champion of semantic HTML, I'm going to use fig caption. The fig caption element. And the caption is basically going to say step.label. There we go. We got the label. We got the personal address and the rest of them. Now we need to basically implement some styles here as well, because this does not look okay. And what else do I want to do here? Oh, I also want to have those lines. So if I zoom this out, you can see there are those lines. I want to implement those lines as well. So where should I go? Outside of this figure element, but keep in mind within this div, because we are repeating this div as many times as there are items within our steps array. So you need to keep in mind which parent it is that is being iterated. So here I am going to apply those. That's going to be a div element. Now I'm going to come back to why I opened up curly braces. So there are some styles here. Let me just copy paste them. It's just a lot of them. These are some class name, some aesthetic styles that I thought would make our app look a little bit better. So I'm going to apply those. These styles, I'm going to need them no matter where we are. So you can see the color of these lines change as well. So if I go back, you can see once we complete that, the color of the line changes as well. So the color of this line should abide by the same logic that we had there as well. All right. So here, what am I going to do? Right here, I am going to say, let's grab our template literal. I'm going to say if index is less than current step index, what do I want to do? I want to implement this style, this background color for the div. So let me just put it there. Otherwise, I want to implement this background color. Just put it there, and we need to wrap it with brackets, with quotes, not brackets. What did I do? What did I do? Perfect. Let's save this so it looks a little bit better. Now we want to grab the previous step. And based on that, we want to apply this. So if let me just go back, you can see, even though we are on this personal, the color of this is still blue. Should I change this or not? So if I come right here, we have all the styles. Let's get rid of this. Save this, reload the page. We don't see our div. I'm going to pause the video, apply all the styles for our section, or I could just apply it right now because there isn't a lot of styles here. So implement that. There we go. Already much better. We have a couple of styles for this div here. And there we go. We got it. So, if I am on that div, if I go back, if I am on this div, the color of this is still blue. Color, I need to do the same thing that I did here. I need to do the same thing. If I want the color to abide by where we are. So just put that there. Instead of text, it should be BG, and there we go. So if I say John Doe Gmail, and there we go. So I actually didn't notice this. If we are on this step, this line belongs to this step. So it should show that, but actually I didn't notice that. And now we can see there is one extra line here as well. So how can I get rid of that line? That has nothing to do with these colors. It's because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, but we want only 3 lines. We don't want 4 lines. So this is going to be rendered conditionally. So I'm going to surround this with curly braces, and we're going to say index. As long as index is less than steps.length, steps.length minus 1, then show this. So if index is less than this, then don't show this line, meaning do not show this div for the last step. Don't show it. All right, let's reload the page, and there we go. So if I keep moving forward, zip code, there we go. Very cool stuff. And there we go. We are on the summary page. We're going to fix the summary, but the summary page is the simplest one when it comes to implementing the JSX. So both of them should look the same. Yeah, very cool. Let's go back to here. I'm going to stay here. Now that the progress indicator is done, let's go ahead and let's tidy up our application. From this point, we are actually talking about how to refactor our app so everything is a little bit more tidy, it's a little bit more reusable, it's a little bit more React-y, if you would. So what do we want to take away? The first thing that you need to do is you need to open up your files, and you need to zoom out for this one. You need to be zoomed out. Trust me, you need to be zoomed out. And personal info, address, preferences, and I'm going to open up this summary page and keep it there. So here we have the form data, form action, initial state. Okay, and then I have again this form data, again the form data right here. So I keep repeating this several times. So I'm going to come to the source folder, types, and within the types I'm going to have one type. I could call it index.ts. Now this is not a React component. This is simple TypeScript file to hold types for us. And now what do I want to do here? Basically, I want to get rid of this. So I'm going to cut that, come to here, paste it. I'm going to keep it like this. I'm going to come right here. I'm going to cut this part, and then I'm going to get rid of that part. All right, let's come right here, put that there, get rid of that, hit enter, and I'm going to cut the middle part and delete this part. Let's come right here, and there we go. So far this is very cool, right? Let's say export. So I'm not gonna import it just yet. I don't want to import it just yet. Now, what else do I want to grab from there? This one, this form action. So I'm gonna cut this from here. Let's come to here. I'm gonna come down here, put it there. So we have one form action. It could have a type of personal info, address, preferences, or keep in mind, or summary. Now, when I say or, what is the or in TypeScript? I know that. That's simple. I'm going to convert this to an object. After converting that to an object, I'm going to pass that there. So that's our or. That's the union operator. That's the or in TypeScript. So we have a type. Let me put this, let me take a look at this. So we have a form action, update personal info, and this shouldn't be, this should be this. Okay, we have the partial, but it being as a value here. Payload, partial, form data, let's get rid of that, save this still. How can I fix this error? So it says it's being used as a value here. So our type is update personal info. Very cool. And we have this type, and then we have this payload. Let me convert this to a type. Const type, not const, just type. We still have the same error, so it has nothing to do with an interface or a type. Let me take a look at this. So let me rearrange this a little better. That there, we could go on one line, payload, partial. We are selecting the form data, aren't we? I think this form action is not going to be, so every form action is an individual object, but then the way I store them is not going to be within an object. So I'm going to get rid of the object syntax. Therefore, I'm going to get rid of the type. And now it's going to be this. There we go. So we have one object. I'm going to keep it there. We are going to have another object with another type. What is that type? The type comes from here. So let me just cut it. We need to have our union and then paste that there. And as soon as I save this, this is how Prettier is going to format it for us for now. Cut this object, put it right here, save this. I wouldn't call this readable. I know, I don't call this readable. Why don't you put it on one line? Is this not gonna work? Let's try it. So here and here. There we go. It worked. Perfect. Now for summary, we're going to have another type here as well. The reason for that is once we submit, we need to reset the form. So that's going to be type reset underscore form. And that's it. So we did extract our types. We need to export them as well. And I'm going to close this. Very good. Let's get rid of this, save this. Let's get rid of this, save this. Let's get rid of this and save that. All right, so we still have these errors. So we extracted our types. I am going to extract our reducer. The reason for that is we have the same reducer. The name is different, but what the reducer does is the same thing. So why not extract it? I'm going to say reducers. Reducers. There we go. And what should I call this reducer? This is going to be called form reducer. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to say form reducer dot. Now, what do you think? Is this a component? No, it's not. Why? Because our reducers, they are simple JavaScript functions. I know. Components are also JavaScript functions, but components return JSX. This does not return JSX. This just combines all the logic in one place. And you might be asking, you might have this question, why didn't we export this into our types? Because this is not relating types. This is relating our reducer. So it should go with our reducers. All right. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const. Now we are going to have some initial state, right? Now, instead of calling it initial personal info state, address info state, we're going to say initial form state. And this is going to come from form data and form data. Didn't import it. Should import it. I'm going to say import form data as well as form action. There we go. Now both of them are the same. Cool. Now in here we are going to have our personal info. So it's right here. This is the personal info. Let me just copy it. Now keep in mind, it is going to be personal info and then that, right? So that's the personal info. Next one we have address info. And after that, we are going to have preferences there. So personal info, this part is done. So I'm going to get rid of that. Let's come to here. I'm going to grab this object. Copy it, put it right there, get rid of semicolon, put in a comma. And preferences, cut it and delete this. Very good. Did I delete it from here? No. Delete it and delete this as well. I saved it, that's why everything went away. So right here, let's put that there. Very good. Now, our initial form state, is done, we need to use it inside of our reducer. Now we want to create a giant reducer that is going to hold all reducers. So I'm going to call it form reducer. Our reducer, we know what it is going to accept. This is going to accept a state. The state is going to be, it's going to have a type of form data. And then it's going to also accept an action based on which it changes the state, or it calculates the next state. And we want to make sure that it returns something that looks like our form data. Now, we need to check which type it is. We need to check which action type it is that we're talking about. If it is personal info, we do something. If it is address info, we do something else. How do we check it? So we need to have a series of if this, then this. If this, then this, like conditional statements. So we could have if else or switch. Now, switch shines really well in this situation. So we're going to go with a switch statement. Switch. Now, what do we want to check? You want to check action.type. So you want to check the type of your action. Now, what if action type is update personal info? The what if part in a switch statement is case. So case, our action is update. See, now since we're using TypeScript, this is the beauty of it. As soon as I do this, there we go. We got our personal info. I don't have to type it. Now, so it is personal info. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to open up. There is colon, so you need to keep that in mind. That's not semicolon, that's colon, because I'm actually going deeper and deeper. So if it is that, then I want to return something. What do you want to return? Remember, what did we return from our reducer function? We returned a spreading, we basically spread the previous state. So that was something that was similar to all of our reducers. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. After doing that, we need to select the personal info. Since we are within that case, we're going to select the personal info, and I only want to update the personal info. And for that personal info, let's grab the previous state dot personal info, as well as the action dot three dots action dot, what do we have? We have payload. And there we go. What is wrong here? This is function lacks ending return statement. So I'm pretty sure TypeScript is going to be able to handle that for us. There we go. It got it. We don't have to do anything. So this is our switch statement. This is where the return ends, and this is the switch. So we need to go out of there. Make sure you basically hit the backspace so you are in line with this case. So this is going to handle the personal info. And what I could do is I could copy this, put it right here, and we should go back. So if I do Shift Tab, it is going to go back. Okay, I need to close this. We already talked about this case. Next up, why did I lose that? Return this. I think there is a mistake here. Yeah, there we go. There we go. We got it. So we didn't close the return statement. This is going to be update address info. So we select the address info, info, and this is going to be payload state.address info. Very good. We need to close our return there. And yep, we should be done with this one. And it's right there. Let me just copy this, come right here, step back, maybe shift, whoops, not there. I don't want to go there. Shift tab, there we go. And this time, this is going to be update preferences. So once you are actually handling a case, you can see our options are becoming less and less, fewer and fewer options. Since we handle the personal info as well as the address, we no longer can handle them again. So there we go. And this is going to be preferences. And this is going to be state.preferences. And what else do I have here? The final case is our reset case. So I'm going to come right here. I'm going to say case. It is reset. What do I want to do next? I want to say return initial form state. That's our reset. Okay. There is one missing. There we go. And finally, we're going to say we need to handle all other cases as well, all unknown cases. And for that, we're going to say default return the current state. Let's save that. There we go. So we have our reducer. We need to export our reducer so we can use it inside of our context API. The context is going to be extremely simple. What we need to do is we need to create a folder right here, and I'm going to call it context. And the context is in fact a component. So I'm going to say form context.tsx. Now, why do we need context? It's because we want to combine all the logic of all reducers into one file so we can retain information once we go to the summary page. So for reducers, we didn't do anything. We didn't return any kind of JSX. This was just our reducer functions. But the actual reducer hooks are going to come right here. When it comes to context, the first thing you need to do is you need to create a context. The context is going to have an initial state of an initial value or state of undefined. But then since we're in TypeScript, we could come up with type safety with more type safety. So this is either going to have a form context type, or it's going to have a type of undefined. The context is going to return for us something which in this context I'm going to call form context. Now, the idea behind the context API of React is to hold the general topic, the general idea of our application, and share it with every component that needs it. What is the general idea of this app? The general idea of this app is to use reducers with the useReduce hook and share it with different components. That's what we want to do. And that's why we use the context. And the context, it means the same thing as in plain English. This is the context of our application. Like you talk to someone, you have a context for your conversation. And this is the context for our application. It's the same thing, the same idea. The implementation is different. Idea is the same. So in here, we're going to basically create something that eventually we are going to export. And this is going to be export function. And I'm going to call this form provider. And now this provider is a unique name that is a best practice if you write it, because this is going to provide the context of our application. And in here, I'm going to pass in children. This is going to come from React. And we need to type annotate this as well. I could say React note, or outside of there, actually. So this is going to be children React dot React node. We use children for React components when the component has an opening tag and a closing tag. And in one situation, only one case, the component will have an opening tag and a closing tag. And that case is when it holds a child. That's why we are going to pass in children here, because this component will hold a child. So you need to take care of that here. Now, again, the context of our app is our reducer, right? So let's grab our reducer or useReducer hook. Where is our useReducer hook? It's right here. This is the reducer function. We have already handled that. So I'm going to delete that from here. We need this navigate, and I'm going to cut this, save this, and get rid of this import from here. You can see our file has gotten a lot easier to work with. And I'm going to get rid of that from there. This reducer function and this. Come to preferences, get rid of the useReducer hook, the reducer function, as well as this one. Keep in mind, the summary page is still remaining. That's simple. We should be able to create that very simply. So we have our useReducer function, useReducer hook. And this is going to accept a reducer. What is that reducer? Now keep in mind, we created that and we exported it, and it is called form reducer. So it's no longer one individual reducer like personal, address, preferences. No, it's one general in which we have selected all of different cases, handled all of them. And what is this initial, the initial state? This is initial form state. We didn't import this, right? So we need to import it. Import initial form. Why don't I see that? I should be able to see it. Import initial form state. I'm not sure. Oops. And from, where is it? It's inside of our types, right? So I need to get out of this folder, go to my types, and grab the index. Initial form state. What is happening here? Initial. Oh, whoops. The problem is that it doesn't exist there. It's in here. It's from our form reducer. So I imported it incorrectly. And now I'm going to fix that. So I'm going to go to our reducers and I'm going to import it from there. Initial form state. What is it called? Let me just copy that right here and declares locally, but it's not exported. Oh, we didn't export it. We didn't export it. This is form context type. I need to create that as well. Did we import this? Yes, I just did that. Let's create this. This is going to be an interface form context type. What is going to be this type? It's going to have a state that is going to be the form data. Import it from there. And this is going to have a dispatch. And the dispatch type is going to be react.dispatch. And this is going to be form action. All right. So now what do we want to do here? We want to return our form context. The form context is going to be a component that's going to have an opening tag and a closing tag in which we're going to pass in the children. And this form context, it has something called a provider. So if I do dot, there we go, we got our provider. And this is basically going to provide the context to the rest of our application, to any component that requires it. But it needs to send some value, right? And the value is going to be state as well as dispatch. And there we go. Now, finally, we need to basically wrap this all inside of a custom hook. So we're going to say export function use form context, and this hook is going to provide this. But there is going to be a message to anyone who doesn't use this context provider to make sure that they use the context provider. That's a common convention. So I'm going to say context is going to be equal to use context, and I'm going to pass in the form context. There we go. And if context is equal to undefined, we show a general message or throw an error. This is a very, very generic one. So I'm going to say, you say something must be within something provider. Something context must be within something provider. That sort of thing. So I'm going to say use form context must be within a form provider. And that's it. And what do we return from this? We return the context that we created. All right, so where do we want to use this context? The first stop for us to use this is going to be within our personal info. So let's go to our personal info. I'm going to get rid of this. Let's come to here, and on top, I'm going to say, so what do we have? We have our use form context, remember? And what is this going to return for us? This is going to return a state as well as dispatch. Dispatch. Let's initialize this as well. And let's save that. And what is the problem? Let's put this steps.firstName. So because we changed the way our data looks, this first name no longer is available on state. This is available on personal info. So before doing that, let's select state, not step, state dot. So there are three, and I'm going to say dot personal. You know what? Where am I? There. So I'm going to say dot, provide a space there, dot. Why don't I get that? Personal info. And then dot. Did I mistype it? Personal info. Dot. No, I didn't. Dot first name. So this is how it works. See? Missed typo. Always typos. They get you. Personal. There we go. Personal info is done. And now let's go to the address. We do the same thing. We have our use form context, which returns exactly two things: state as well as dispatch. And then you need to initialize this, and you need to fix that here as well. So you have state. Let me select all three instances of that. Dot address info. Okay, cool. Preferences. What do we have inside the preferences? I could just copy this. Just copy it, put it there, and import it as well. There we go. And this is going to be state dot preferences dot newsletter. And then for this one, this is going to be dot preferences dot notification. And for these ones, what we are going to do is again the same thing. So preferences dot theme. And there we go. Let me just copy that. Put it right here as well. Save this. There we go. All the errors are gone. So I'm going to close these pages. And our form context, form reducer. Let's, there we go. Let's reload the page. Address. What seems to be the problem? Let's fix our problem. It says use form context must be within a form provider. Okay, above error. Let me spec, reload the page. Let's go to our home page. So we have that error everywhere. I did use that, didn't I? Use form context. There we go. And let's take a look at our context. We said that if the context is undefined, then you should throw that. And then, okay, yeah, I see what the problem is. Now this context, it should surround our entire application, but it doesn't. So I'm going to cut this. And in here, we need to basically make sure that the form provider is right here. So I'm going to say form provider. This is going to have an opening and a closing tag. And in there, there's going to be a router. And there we go. We got our app. Let's provide a first name, last name, email, next. An address as well, next. Light. But we select both the newsletter as well as notification. So if I go back, okay, this last one, personal info, context, where is our preferences page? Why is this working like this? So if I come right here, if I go back, if I click on back, it should, so I am in the address, preferences, I click on this back, it should go to address. But instead it goes to summary. So what seems to be the problem? Inside of our preferences. It should be okay. This is okay. Unclick navigate. Let me collapse these so navigation is a little bit easier and smoother. Okay. Use navigate. Click on next. It goes to summary, right? Next page. Unclick. I'm going to give this a type of button because I think both of the buttons, they are acting as though they submit the form. So I'm just going to give this a type of button. So just to tell it, relax, you don't submit the form. So now if I click on back, you can see it went to back. And if I click on next, it goes to next. And these arrows, these styles, they change nicely. So far, everything is okay. So if I go back, you can see we have our information because we used context. We have back, it goes forward. Okay, I should do the same thing inside of the address page as well. This is going to be type button. So go back and go back. There we go. We got all of our info. Forward, forward, forward. And then we have the summary. So the last page that we need to create is going to be our summary page. For our summary page, much like any other component that I create, I'm going to first go ahead with the markup. So there's going to be a section element. The section element is going to have a div. Now, there is going to be a lot of styles that are a lot of elements that only refer to how it looks on the website. Okay, there is no other functionality behind them because I just want it to be laid out in different ways. So you can see it goes like this and then it goes like that. So I need to basically make sure that it is responsive on smaller screens as well. Within this div, we are going to have an h2. this is gonna say personal information, personal information, and then I'm gonna have another div. There is gonna be one paragraph. The paragraph's job is to show state dot. Now let's import our hook, our context. Let's just copy it, put it right here, and let's import it. T. Very good. So if I say state dot, we can see we have all of the information. So now I'm in the personal info. So I'm going to go to there. I'm going to select the first name. And then I'm going to select the last name. And then I'm going to select the email. All right. So like this, the first one is done. Let's get out of this div. Let's create another div. And for this one, we are going to have another h2. This is going to say address and a div, bunch of paragraphs, state dot address dot, which was the first one, street, right? And then we have the city, and then we have the zip code. Very cool, right? So far. And after that, I'm going to create another div. This is going to be our preferences. This should be within an h2 preferences. And then I'm going to create, now here we are going to create content for our newsletter as well as notifications. But at this point, I'm not sure if I have any newsletter, if the user has tick marked that or the user has not tick marked it. So if any of these exists, then I want to create that element. Otherwise, I'm not going to create anything. And I'm basically going to say this, no preferences. So I'm thinking of doing something that relates to JavaScript. So I'm going to say state.preferences dot if the newsletter exists, this newsletter, or state.preferences dot notifications exists. If any of these exists, then I want to do something in here. I am going to say, let's just say basically exists or exist. Otherwise, I want to do something else. And I want to say no preferences. Save that. There we go. So if I come right here, you can see it says exist. They exist, but it doesn't know what they are. But if I were to, where is our button? So let's create our button. I'm going to get out of this div. I'm going to create another div for our theme preference as well. And this is going to be an h2 theme preference. And within here, I am going to pass in whatever theme preference the user has selected. So what has the user selected? That's within state dot preferences dot theme, whatever the user has selected. But then I want to apply some styles for this. So I'm going to put that within a span and I'm going to come back to these styles. That part is done. The final part is extremely simple. We have done that several times and I'm just going to copy it, put it right here. So we have this button that if you click back, it goes to preferences page, or if you click this button, then the submit button, this is going to basically call this handle submit function for us, which we are yet to create. We are going to create that. So let's create these. Let's take care of our navigate. We know how that works. We have this const navigate, use navigate from React Router DOM. So that part is done. After that, I am going to say function handle submit. What do I want to do here? Now, once the data is submitted, I want to send some information to my reducer, function. What information do I want to send? I want to send a specific type that is called reset form. So that's something that I want to send. And then I want to show an alert to my users because the user experience is extremely cosmic. I'm going to say successfully right there. An amazing user experience. And finally, I want to navigate the user to the home page. Let's save everything. There we go. So you can see theme preferences, it says light. If I come right here and if I select dark, and if I come here, it says dark. And since we have preferences, it says exist. Let's zoom this in, exist, but it doesn't know what are those preferences. If I take these out, and now it says no preferences. So we need to fix this. We need to fix what preferences exist in there. So it's right here. And here, what do I want to do here? So if preferences exist, I need to make sure to understand what kind of, which of the preferences actually exists. So let's just get started with this. I need to check which of these preferences exist. So it means I'm going to do something JavaScript-y in HTML. Even though I am within curly braces, since I opened up fragments, that is still HTML. I need to open up curly braces again. If state.preferences.newsletter exists, then I want to show this element. This element is a paragraph element that contains a check circle, and it has this class name, which I'm just going to say size is going to be 5. Size is going to be 5. And the text for this one is as follows. Let me just copy it so I don't waste too much of your time. There we go. And I forgot that one. Very cool. So if newsletter exists, show this. And there should be some text in here as well. I'm going to say newsletter subscription. Save that. There we go. So we got newsletter subscription. But what if notification also exists? Where is that? So we need to check that as well. I'm going to come out of here. Keep in mind, you should be within the React fragments, within the fragments. And we're going to do the same thing. State.preferences.notification. If this exists, then I want to create the following element. Just copy it, put it right there. This is going to be notifications enabled. And there we go. So if I get rid of this, go to next, no preferences. If I select notification, go to next, it says notifications enabled. And that's it. If you submit, it says submit, and then all the info should be within our console log. We could log that as well if we want to. But I'm going to take this for a test drive. There are the styles remaining that I need to implement, but I just have to take it. So John Doe email. Next, we have the street address. Select both of them dark, and there we go. We got that here. The preferences page is okay. If I try to submit this, it says submit. We go to the initial page, the personal page, but then we get rid of all the info. Everything is reset. Very cool. Cool stuff, right? So first off, I'm going to implement all these styles. And there we go. Our application is done. Let's take it for a spin. So I'm going to say Bob, Bobby, and bb@gmail.com. Let's zoom this in. Let's hit next. There we go. So we have this address, the same address. Sure. And there we go. We got our newsletter notification, and there we go. We got it. Everything is done. And we should be able to see that inside of the see the result of the form submitting in here as well. There we go. We got all of that info. Now, I did add this console log just so you know that all the information is within the state all of that, like from the personal info page all the way to the last page. Everything is right here. And if you want to do something with it, now you know where that is. So our application has come to an end. I really enjoyed creating this and recreating it again with you. And that's it for this video. See you in the next one.